So guys, I want to do a talk about the hypocrisies of our liberal society and how our liberal society has demonstrated its lack of consistency in its treatment of Christianity and Christians and the Holy Church with those of the Islamic community and other communities, as well as demonstrating the numerous and various hypocrisies and double standards of the Western world. And my first and main example to that is the recent decision of the European Court, which recently ruled in favor of a feminist who interrupted a Christian religious service naked from the top up and performed a theatrical abortion of our Lord Jesus Christ, mockingly dressed as Mary. I'm going to read from a Catholic news site dated October the 19th, 2022. The judges of the European Court of Human Rights, the ECHR, have ruled unanimously that a feminist who simulated aborting Jesus on the altar of the Parisian church of Le Madeleine, bare-breasted, was exercising her freedom of expression. In an October 11th decision, the ECHR condemned France for having pronounced a suspended prison sentence against Héloïse Bouton, a former member of a group Femmes, for acts of sexual exhibition. Bouton entered the famous Parisian church topless in December 2013, covered in pro-abortion slogans, and interrupted a rehearsal of Christmas carols. As local media reported, the feminist stood in front of the altar wearing a blue veil to mock the Virgin Mary, arms open in a cross with pieces of animal liver supposed to represent the fetus. She then mimed an abortion of Jesus before urinating on the ground in front of the faithful. Christmas is cancelled, Fenem wrote on its Facebook page following this desecration. From the Vatican to Paris, the international relay of Femmes against anti-abortion campaigns led by Catholic lobby continues. The Holy Mother Héloïse has just aborted the embryo Jesus on the altar of the Madeleine. And this act of blasphemy, this act of desecration, was said by the European Court of Human Rights to be a legitimate act of freedom of speech. In other words, she didn't commit a crime, she didn't do anything wrong by pissing in a church, by standing naked in a church, by insulting the religious expressions of Catholics in France. What she did was a completely legal expression of her human right, according to the European Court of Human Rights. This vile, despicable court overturned the legitimate judgment not just of the local court in France, but of the Supreme Court of France that found Héloïse guilty of blasphemy. But the same European Court of Human Rights found against an Austrian who had stated publicly that Mohammed was a paedophile and his behavior was paedophilic. And when that Austrian was prosecuted for blasphemy, for injuring the religious sentiments of the Muslims of Austria, the European Court of Human Rights found in favour of the Austrian court and said that it was an illegitimate use of freedom of speech to describe Mohammed as a paedophile. And so what we see, ladies and gentlemen, is that the European Court of Human Rights finds it acceptable to blaspheme against the Christian faith, to desecrate Christian churches, to mock the Christian religion, to insult Christians in their places of worship, but says that you cannot publish facts about Muhammad that replicate the very statements of Islamic sources themselves that demonstrate Muhammad married a 6-year-old child and had sex with her when she was 9. It is the very height of hypocrisy of this European institution, demonstrating that liberal society is anti-Christian and duplicitous in its application of its laws and standards. The European Court of Human Rights is not worthy of your respect. It is not worthy of your support. And if you are a Christian, you should campaign to destroy this institution. This European Court of Human Rights is not worthy of the title a court, because it has no sense of justice. It has no sense of equality under the law. It is nothing but a puppet mechanism of a group of liberal elites who sit in their beds terrified of a Muslim backlash and so suppress any legitimate criticism of Islam, whilst harbouring in their heart hatred against the Christian faith and hatred against the Christian church. And they demonstrate their duplicity and double standards by their actions and their judgments. Christians around Europe should call for the destruction and the abolition of the Court of Human Rights. Christians in the UK should call for the government of the UK to withdraw from the European Court of Human Rights. And this is not the only expression of the hypocrisy of our liberal elites. There are many other examples. Take, for example, the green activists who are blocking our roads, damaging works of art, and committing vandalism, liberté in our streets. And the state is doing nothing to stop them. And why? Because our liberal elites celebrate the cause of those green activists. But those same liberal elites have called for the banning of legitimate protests outside of abortion clinics. And why? Because protesting outside of abortion clinics goes against what the liberal elites want you to follow, but protesting in favour of the environmental fanaticism of some goes in favour of what they want to achieve. And so we see a double standard of our liberal elites. A further example of the same is the treatment of the cause of Ukraine and the cause of Armenia. Both countries have come under attack by aggressive enemy states. Ukraine by Russia, Armenia by Azerbaijan. But the European Union is willing to boycott buying gas from Russia because they want to defend the freedom of the Ukrainians. And I agree with them. It's right to stand up for the Ukrainian people. But the same European Union and the same liberal elites are silent about the aggressive military campaign of Islamist Azerbaijan against Armenia and are willing to buy the gas of Azerbaijan, thus funding a war against Christian Armenia. Think about how the West argued for the self-determination of Kosovo, Serbia, invaded independent Serbia, carved out lands that belonged to Serbia and handed them over to Islamist terrorists and Albanian nationalists. And yet the same EU, the same NATO, the same Western world is completely silent about the legitimate demands of the vast majority of the people who live in Artsakh, Azerbaijan, a province of Azerbaijan populated by Armenians who want to be independent of Azerbaijan and join Armenia. Consider how these same liberal hypocrites celebrated the riots, vandalism and murder of BLM activists across cities in the United States and lied about what was happening on the ground, saying that these riots were mainly peaceful. And yet we see in America those same liberal elites getting into fits of apoplectic rage because of a right-wing riot in Washington, D.C. So months of riots by BLM communists were whitewashed, whilst one right-wing riot run by Trumpian supporters was decried as an attempt to usurp the state. Consider how the liberal state turned a blind eye recently to Muslim mobs marching in Leicester, harassing the Hindu community, harassing Hindu temples under the guise of protecting the Muslim community in Leicester.
Lies.
But that same liberal state condemned the EDL for protesting in Rotherham, for defending working class children from Muslim grooming gangs. Consider how
that's when they turn the blind eye.
this liberal state,
when all those Christian
the liberal state,
were raping children,
has been silent about the protests
nor do you
of women in Iran
to talk about the
fighting
Christian
for their
pedophiles.
freedom and fighting for their equality under an Islamic regime
Is that your idea
that oppresses them and turns them into second-class citizens.
It's only
But
Muslim
those same liberals demand that Christians stand up for the women's right to murder their own children in the West. Now, ladies and gentlemen, notice how the militant communist heckles me for standing up for justice.
And when I mentioned
This man who justified the attempted murder of a woman in this park, this Christophel who hates Christians and attacks Christians every week, and the Islamist who walked away who also hates Christians.
Likes
These
pedophiles.
people
That's what we
are the enemies of the good.
As long as you're
These
good
people
for this
are your
Christian
enemies,
pedophile,
Christians.
Then Bob won't say
And you
a
must
word
stand up to
about
them.
that. He'll not
You
come
must
to this
stand up
podcast and
to the
talk
liberal
about
militants.
Christian
You must
pedophiles.
stand
There
up
is only one
to the
pedophile
militant communists.
He doesn't like.
You must stand
That
up
is Muslim
to the Islamist militant.
Therefore,
Do not be afraid of them.
he likes pedophiles.
Do not be browbeat by them.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Do not cower from them.
to believe.
But girdle strength in your heart, strength in your mind,
He come here
and strength
and
in your loins
Catholic pedophiles
to stand up to Islamists like
talk
that
about
and communists like this.
priests.
Do not take lectures from
He
them.
doesn't give a damn.
Do not
about
let them
pedophiles.
dictate to
He
you
doesn't give a
what is
damn.
right,
Say
what is wrong.
persecuting
All
Christians
Stand up
like
to
ISIS.
this
Christian ISIS
to this
That's
who legitimize
is
the
him.
persecution of Christians, who persecute
Fix it.
women, who persecute your brothers and sisters in Christ around the
as long
world.
as you're a Catholic.
The reason why, ladies and
right-wing,
gentlemen,
felony.
that they
violent.
behave in the way that they
You
do
telling me?
is
Give me my
because
number. Try
they
back me.
feel that they can.
Remember when
Why?
you talked about
Because they
metaphysics?
are emboldened
Jake, the
by your
Muslim,
weakness.
Jake.
It is
That's
your
how we
weakness
left in your
that
wake.
emboldens the enemies of
Second
Christ.
take.
It is your weakness that emboldens the enemies of our Lord. And
You're a
scum.
Catholic pedophile.
the apostles teach
He's
us,
never come here once.
the apostles teach us that we,
pedophiles
that those who are cowards
The whale, my friend.
will burn in hell.
done in this park.
So to be strong
Just
is
stand up
to
to
be
talk.
Muslim.
Communists.
Look at how they are triggered.
Racists.
Because I stand up for my brothers and sisters persecuted by people like him.
For this hating
Because I
wasteland
stand
here,
up
this
for
more
my brothers and
worth
sisters
anything under the shoes
standing up
of anyone
and
else present
persecuted
is
by
Speaker's
people like
Corner.
him.
That's Bob.
Communist
They both
right
know
wing,
that
neo-Nazi,
if they talk, no one will listen to them.
dictatorial,
And that is why
and
they
right-wing
come to heckle
political,
me.
apolitical,
So,
too critical,
Let's do a debate.
diacritical. No, we won't, because you're looking to the camera.
ladies and
Don't
gentlemen,
turn to me and I like Moses, I'll
brothers
stop.
and sisters,
Bang the gavel and the hammer.
if we don't stand up to Islamists like this,
Crusaders,
we don't stand
Crusaders
up
killing
to
Christians.
Islamists like this,
Crusaders in the centuries.
vile
The fourth
human
crusades
beings
killing Christians.
who want to make
no parade.
Christians
Stop wearing your
second-class
masquerade.
citizens.
That's how you got
These people will impose Sharia law over us and make us into second-class citizens.
You're already a second-class citizen when you were
He
poor.
wants to turn you,
So,
brothers and
remember what you
sisters,
said about my mum?
into
Head
second-class citizens, having less rights than him. That's what he stands
I'm
for.
an alien.
And the reason why he behaves like this
Alhamdulillah.
is because his religion teaches him
Be to the
he is
Father alone.
superior,
You're trying to hide the fact that you
And he
worship God the
believes
Father alone.
that he can persecute
Man, go
and
home.
discriminate
a channel called
against
Soko.
Christians. Trust me,
You try act sane when you're
if you
psycho,
do
not
not
even
stand
local.
up to this Islamist ideology, this kind of subhuman behavior, akin to a bark, is what we will experience in
Hitler,
every street
Bob the
in
Builder,
our
the
world.
same, not peace-loving
People like him
archbishops know
are
the same. They
homophobic
are safe.
and believe homosexuals
like you.
should be killed.
They're waste man.
People like him
What? Extreme
believe
Christian like Anders
that
Breivik.
at the end of the world
Anders Breivik.
he will be able
You
to
are
kill
extreme.
all
You don't worship
Jews.
the Creator the
People
way that
like
peace-loving
him
Christians love
believe
extreme. what
that
Muslims,
you as a Christian
you ain't peace
should be
loving.
made
You ain't
a second-class
you just
citizen.
nothing. It's a
People
tough day.
like him
Coming on Sunday trying to
believe
earn money, and you
that
talking
women
to me like
should be made second-class citizens.
Because you make
People
money.
like him
Christians
believe
just like Bob.
that pagans
All you're trying to do
should
is
be
get
killed.
views and rob.
People like him
and souls and
believe that those who choose to
why you got
leave
left
the
behind.
religion of Islam
Did you get
should
left
be
behind?
killed. People like him
with a voice that's
believe
so loud.
that
Why are you
a
shouting, bro?
Christian
Are you too
cannot
proud?
have authority
Seed.
over a Muslim in the state. People like him believe that a Christian man cannot marry a Christian woman. People like him believe that the cross should not be shown publicly. People like him believe that Christians should not be allowed to evangelize their faith. People like him believe that Christians should not be allowed to have public processions in the streets of Muslims.
3 hours later.
People like him believe that Christians should pay a discriminatory tax called the jizya that demonstrates their humiliation in an Islamic state. People like him believe that slavery should be reintroduced as a legitimate trade. People like him believe that you should be able to marry prepubescent children and have sex with them like their prophet. People like him believe. That is what they believe. That is what we are up against. And you will never be able to fight them whilst you are in bed with liberals, whilst you are in bed with plurality or liberal agenda, because the liberals are weak and they give trash like that too much space to preach their poison, too much space to push their Sharia law. A good and just person will stand against Sharia law just as they stood against Nazism and fascism, because Sharia law is in the same cesspit of inhumanity and injustice that fascism and communism sit in. It is putrid filth. It is the enemy of all that is good and decent. And you should have no shame in opposing such an ideology. But how, as Christians, can we oppose it? We must oppose it as Christians, authentically as Christians. We must separate ourselves from the liberal agenda and from the aspirations of liberal society, and we, as Christians, should envision our own political destiny, our own political aspirations, and our own vision of a Christian state that we call Christendom, and seek to reconnect society, politics, and economics with our Christian faith. Any questions, ladies and gentlemen? Any questions?
Is there any state existing today or historically that you would aspire towards that might fit your definition of this ideal Christian society, state?
So the question is, and I'm not going to shout now, so if you can't hear me, you'll have to come closer. So the question is there any state that represents the kind of society that I'm talking about? The answer to that question is no. Doesn't exist.
Historically, never existed.
No, historically, it existed in that super state called Christendom, or the Byzantine Empire. However, it's utterly foolish to try to reinvent the past.
Yeah.
What we need to do is accept that the Western Church is in a different place.
Yeah.
And we need to aspire to build from where we are rather than just drag the past into the future. So I'm not talking about going into the past, but learning from the past and bringing it into our present.
So the Orthodox Church is sort of the more authentic church. Would that be a correct?
No, I
idea?
haven't said that. No, I haven't said that.
Okay.
The Christian church is that body of people that are Christians.
Okay.
And we should aspire to connect economics, politics, society, culture to our Christian faith so that our faith is influencing how we do politics, how we do economics, how we do society, and how we do culture. And we've got to re-envision that for our time. Learning about what mistakes we made in the past and not repeating them, and taking what we can learn from the past and applying it in a modern sense in the present.
Okay.
Any other questions, ladies and gentlemen, about our topic today? Any questions going once? Our topic is about a Christian society and freeing ourselves from liberalism. Questions going twice? Questions going 3 times? Okay, are there any questions about Christianity before I move on to a new topic?
That gentleman gave you.
Thank you. Okay. So, I'm going to move on to another topic then.